I'm reading them in the order in which they appear to mine eyes, and it looks like Steve Darrow's at the top of the list here. What are your favorite? Sometimes the coincidences. What are your favorite memorable lines from movies? E.g., I picked a bad week to quit sniffing glue. Isn't that funny how that works sometimes? I hadn't read that question yet until just now. I got a couple. I think one of my favorite moments in movies, I'm speaking as a filmmaker now, it's not one of my favorite moments in terms of the kind of thing I have to go back and see a bunch. But one of my favorite moments in movies, just as a filmmaker, is in Pulp Fiction. And I was watching that film, and you're something like a third of the way through it or something. And Vincent Vega and Marcellus' wife pull up at the at Jack Rabbit Slim's. They're going to go have dinner and as it turns out, a little dancing. And Vincent doesn't want to go, or she's talking him into it or something. And she looks at him and she goes, "Oh, come on, don't be such a square." And she draws this square in the air, but Tarantino puts an actual square. He puts an actual white square on the frame, and I just took my breath away. I was just, what? That's the kind of genius. That's the kind of confidence that comes from genius. It may not dawn on many people just how unbelievably bold that was. Just how unbelievably bold. It doesn't happen anywhere before, and it doesn't happen anywhere again. I'm not aware that it happens in any other of his movies. He just decided to do it, and it gave the film a kind of a tone that was just. I was flabbergasted. I was gobsmacked. I remember I sat there and said aloud, I cannot believe that he had the nerve to do that. But of course he had the nerve to do it. He's Quentin Tarantino. I don't agree with everything he says, so needless to say. But he's just got the confidence of somebody who has that kind of ear. Mamet has that kind of confidence. So some of my favorite lines, well, let's do this all night. Speaking of Mamet, one of my favorite lines in a movie I remember when I saw it, blew my mind, was the classic, 4 minutes or 5 minutes, where Alec Baldwin appears in the salesman's meeting on that rainy night in Glengarry Glen Ross. That's probably the most impressive 4 minutes ever. Introduction, 4 or 5 minutes. It's absolutely magnificent performance on his part. But I remember hearing it, and it just stuck with me. And he said, "All right, so here's what's going on. There's going to be a sales competition. First prize is a brand new Cadillac. Second prize is a set of steak knives. Third prize is you're fired." And I thought, oh, the genius of that. Because it's the steak knives. I mean, that's it, right? It's the steak knives. That's what makes that line so unbelievably brilliant. These sale numbers are down, and we're going to shake this place up. So whichever one of you has the highest numbers, you get a Cadillac, brand new Cadillac. Here's a huge reward. Second prize is a set of steak knives, and third prize is you're fired, which is essentially saying there essentially is no second prize. Right? You either get first prize and get a reward. Second prize is you get to keep your job, because steak knives is just, I don't know what, it's just brilliant, just brilliant. I loved it. Lots and lots and lots and lots of lines in that movie. I think probably my most memorable line in film, the one I think when I just read this question, the first thing that came to my mind in terms of the one line I remember more than anything else, just popped right to my head, was that scene in Aliens where Hudson's starting to freak out again, and and Ripley is trying to admonish him and tell him to buck up and be a man, and he turns to him and she points to Newt, the little girl, and she says, Hudson, this little girl survived here for 9 weeks on her own. And Hudson goes, well, great, why don't you put her in charge then? I just thought it was just lost it. It was just absolutely fantastic. And that his whole thing when the dropship crashes is just, it was one of those moments watching it when I was just like, I was like, hurrah. He's a great character. Paxton's character is great. Bill Paxton's character in that movie made that movie work. Without Hudson in that movie, there's something enormous missing. You need Hicks to be quiet, and you need Hicks to be kind of, a little bit ironic, Yeah, it doesn't mean we're engaged or anything, but Hicks is the tough guy. Hudson is the archetypical example of the griping soldier, and it just gave the movie a tone of realism. It made what it did. You know what it was? Hudson made those people real. He made you care about the Marines and aliens, because so often, the people who are in the squad, you're supposed to like Ripley, and she's got lines, and maybe Hicks has some lines, and you're not supposed to like Gorman, but Hudson made all of those people real. And that whole thing when that thing crashes, and he's just like looking around, he's like, oh, that's it, man. Game over, man. Game over. It's just brilliant. You may not have been paying attention, but we're getting our asses kicked back here. It's terrific. And he was a great actor, and he died real young, a year ago or so. And and Aliens was a parable about Vietnam, and so was Return of the Jedi. Dave Big Booty says Cameron can go screw himself. He can go screw himself, but it's still a great movie. It's my favorite movie. And it doesn't matter if it's a parable about Vietnam, because it's not. Platoon. If Cameron's intending it to be an allegory or a parable, let him pretend away. For the rest of us, it was just the best action movie I'd seen, and I think, without question, my favorite movie. It's not the best movie I've ever seen by a long shot, but it's my favorite movie. I don't ever remember coming out of a movie feeling better than I did when I saw Aliens. Mostly because I liked the first one so much. This is back when I was really trying to make a living as a filmmaker. It was 70, you want to say 79 maybe, or 77, 79, I want to say, for Alien, the first one. And there's a trade magazine, which I think still exists, very small magazine called Cinefex, and we were completely into science fiction, and there was none. I mean, it was Logan's Run, right, and nothing in the 70s. And we saw in Cinefex, at a friend of mine who was a director of photography, and we saw these upcoming special effects from this movie called Alien. And it looked really good, and the ship looked really cool, and the suits were odd. The suits were gothic, but they were real believable. And so I went to see it, and I just loved Alien. Alien just scared the bejesus out of me. It really did. Because how many Alien movies have we had since then? 30 years, 40 years. And by the way, Dave Big Booty gets another line that I was just going to mention from Aliens, where in the very beginning, when they first come out of hypersleep and they're doing pull-ups, and Vasquez, the tiny little Hispanic woman with the smart rifle, she's in this constant running, bickering war with Hudson, and they're both doing pull-ups next to each other. And Hudson looks over at her because she's really cut, really buff and strong and real severe looking with short hair. And he says to her, hey, Vasquez, has anyone ever mistaken you for a man? And she goes, no. Have you? Oh, have you ever been mistaken for a man? And she goes, no. Have you? Classic. Anyway, so the first Alien was great. And I was heavily invested in that movie. Saw it many, many times in the theater. I don't know if those of you out there who've seen it know this, but Ridley Scott did two things in that movie that really made that movie work because it doesn't matter how good of an actor you are. I think any of the cast of the first Alien movie was just terrific. Every one of them were just absolute knockout performers, terrific actors. But you don't know. If something horrifying is about to happen. You know that you can portray being scared, and if you say on the script it says the entire crew is shocked and disgusted, you as an actor you start thinking about what shocked and disgusted looks like, and they're all terrific actors, and I'm sure they could have pulled it off beautifully. But what Ridley Scott did in that movie was he had set up the set and talked with John Hurd, who was the guy who had the first of the aliens implanted in him, and the crew knew. And John Hurd knew, and Ridley knew, but the rest of the cast didn't know that this creature was going to burst out of his chest. They'd been told that he was just going to get sick and start to go into convulsions, and they were going to have to hold him down. And so, or however it was set up, because he was maybe already on his back, something about that. In any event, they didn't know. And so when that thing just bursts out there and all this blood appears, and blood gets splattered on their faces, they didn't know that was coming either. Apparently, this is the story I heard. If you watch that movie, when that moment happens, you'll see the faces on those actors playing the rest of the crew. And those are great reactions because they're real. They're as shocked and horrified as we are. That was great. The second thing is that when they were shooting it in the corridors of the Nostromo, and they're going in there because they didn't have any weapons. They had just torches and what's his name? I used to know their names. I used to know all of their names. Oh. Harry Dean Stanton's character, anyway. I used to know all of them. He rigs a flamethrower. That's another line I like, by the way. And he's jury rigged a flamethrower to fight this alien, and somebody, Dallas, maybe says, "Do you think this will stop him or whatever?" And he says, "No, but it might give him a little incentive." What the hell was that all about? Oh, so they don't know where the so they're in all the corridors and these T intersections, and all the lights are flashing and everything. And Ridley Scott didn't tell the actors which direction the monster was coming from, because it was a real thin guy in a monster suit, but they didn't know which way he was coming, and so when they went down those halls looking around like that, they're looking at guys who didn't know where the monster was coming from. I like that kind of stuff. I like those kind of stories. So at any event, I liked Alien so much. I liked it so much, and when the sequel came out, I went to see it, and I thought, well, it'd probably be more of the same. But having been so invested in the first movie and despising that creature, that alien creature, just despising it so much, I said John Hurt. I meant to say John Hurt. If I said John Hurd, maybe I just mispronounced it because I wasn't thinking of John Hurt. John Hurt, the British actor, died recently too, I think. Come on. Oh, so I hated these damn animals. And I'm watching Aliens, and when they start loading up, and then they start, on their way down, and they do the dropship thing, and they're got all their gear, because at first you don't really know, but once Apon's going up and down the lines, and badasses, and they get into their dropship, and they put them in the APC, and they load that thing in the dropship, and the music's starting to increase, and you get that kind of real martial music, and they do the orbital drop and stuff, and the tension's building up, and then these guys come spilling out of the back, and they're doing all these really cool tactical maneuvers, and they're breaching the door, and I'm going, this is awesome. And when they first saw these aliens, and they opened fire with fully automatic weapons, I was just cheering my lungs out. Because this is the thing, right? I mean, this is the problem. It's the problem with automatic weapons. If you have automatic weapons in the first movie, you don't have a movie. If you have automatic weapons in any of the Jurassic Park movies, you don't have a movie. You just don't. There's no movie. The velociraptors aren't a threat in Jurassic Park, and neither is T-Rex. If you've got I was going to say an AR-15, you're probably better served by an AK-47 in that particular case. But in any event, watching these Marines turn, honest to God, human brain power on these aliens, it was just, I loved it. And when they barricaded the door and they've got the little acoustic tracker and the things are getting closer and closer and they're trying to weld it and they're holding their position and they're saying it's 15 meters and it's getting closer, it's getting closer, it's getting closer, and then it says, like, I don't know what the number is, 5 meters, and he says it can't be 5 meters, that's inside the door, and then they look up at the roof, and I just felt my skin just crawl. That's what a horror movie is supposed to do to you. Yeah, it was great movie. Let's see, some favorite lines. Buckaroo Banzai's classic line, no matter where you go, there you are. And I liked very much his line when he's Jeff Goldblum's doing the brain surgery and Buckaroo gets called in to assist with the brain surgery, and Goldblum's talking about the problem with this aneurysm that they're working on, and he's poking around. You don't see inside the brain, obviously. And then Goldblum does something like this, and Buckaroo says, no, don't touch that. You don't know what it's attached to. That was a great line. Laugh while you can, Monkey Boy is a great line. Where are we going? Planet 10. When? Real soon. That's all great stuff. The Clint Eastwood movies, needless to say, are iconic. I can almost do them without butchering them. I used to be able to do them without butchering them, but that whole, Dirty Harry is chasing this guy, finally trips, he's down on the ground. Dirty Harry's got this revolver leveled at him, and this is the first time we've ever seen this character. This is the introduction to Harry Callahan, and he's pointing this gun at this guy, at this thug, and he says, "I know what you're thinking, punk. No, I know what you're thinking. Did I fire 6 shots or only 5? Well, to tell you the truth and all the excitement, I kind of forgot myself. So the question is, do you feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?" Genius. It's genius. It occurs to me now. It didn't occur to me then. It occurs to me now that if I'm lying on the ground and... No, I take it back. Never mind. I was going to say that you should be able to look into a revolver and see whether or not the thing is loaded, but the round could be in the chamber, so I retract my statement. That was great. Make My Day was great. So much of that is great. There's a line in Unforgiven. It's not... It's something to the effect of where... in Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood's character rides into town, goes into the saloon, finds out who shot his friend, I guess it was Morgan Freeman. I said Morgan Fairchild. Morgan Freeman, and put him in a coffin on display outside the saloon. And Clint Eastwood's character goes in there and said, "Whose place is this?" And the bartender says, "Mine." And he just shoots him dead. And Gene Hackman says, you just shot and killed an unarmed man." It's full of rage and everything. And Clint Eastwood turns to him and said, "Well, if he's going to put my friend up as a decoration, he should have armed himself." Oh, that was great. Speaking of which, Mal has some great lines in Firefly and Serenity. That line about, don't you worry if I'm, he's worried about being killed by Mal. He says, "Don't you worry, if the day comes where I ever kill you, you're going to be looking at me and you're going to be armed," something like that. Those are great lines. And there's 100 million of them, to be honest with you, Steve. So when you think about those lines that stick with you, they're the ones that just stick with you because of who you are. I mean, there's millions of them. Is that right? Hang on. Azimuth Smith said, I think he's referring to the Unforgiven. He says, he comes in and says, "Who owns this shithole?" Yeah, see, that's it, right? I mean, that's really it. Trump speaks like Dirty Harry, and the news media speaks like, Laurence Olivier. And they speak like Dirty Harry and much worse in private. That's the thing that's most unbearable about that whole thing. So I could do that all night, but I don't think I will. Do maybe another one or two. We'll see what's going on.